definition is direct, but it's also sometimes it's hard to grasp because it could mean so many different things to different people. Like for example, on the left hand, you have two children who are playing with the recycling bin. In the cities that I've lived in, we place our plastics and our metals within the recycling bins, and the refuse, the trash trucks come and pick them up. But in another place, it could be building schools, shelters, and outdoor facilities using as much natural materials as possible so that the impact on the environment is mitigated. And when you think about this issue, each one of you, you consume on a day-to-day basis. So how you go about contributing to sustainability it varies on a day-to-day basis by each individual, but the whole goal is to move forward in a way that uses less resources so we do not deplete the planet's resources for future generations. Now, one of the biggest challenges that we face in the world today, on one hand, it's a blessing because over the past 100 years, the human population has rapidly expanded because of modern technology with regards to medicines, sanitation, education, and our capacity to build environments where more human populations can be sustained. That has allowed our human populations to exponentially grow, and human population is projected to continue growing. On the other hand, what that has done is place tremendous pressure on our planet in terms of the resources that that every individual needs to survive, which is food, housing, the power we use for electrification, the cars, our waste, clean water, so forth and so on. So on the one hand, the good part is that human beings are healthier and living longer because of modern technology and medicine. The challenge is that the growth in human populations are placing much more stress upon our environment. And we need to find a way to solve the challenges of sustainability to continue to support, so our societies can support this population growth. Now, in general, the fastest growing regions of the world also have the fastest growing populations. For the most part, at this juncture in the 21st century, most population growth is occurring in Asia and Africa. This was kind of skewed in the previous 100 years to North America and to Europe. But what this means is that where you have the population growth, you also see cities growing. You see larger economies, which is also a measurement of the goods and services and the consumption patterns that are happening in these regions. And this is, again, this is a story of humanity because we've never been here before, but it's going to take new thinking, new ways of doing to be able to sustain the consumption patterns that we are having currently in the world. Now, I thought this was a very interesting graph here, that when we talk about the projected population growth over the world over the next 50 years, the population growth in large ways coincides with economic growth. but also a lot of this growth will be contained in a few countries that are continuing to rapidly expand. India, Nigeria, Pakistan, uh, Congo, Ethiopia, Tanzania, the United States, and also Indonesia is one of the fastest growing countries in the world. What this means is that when we talk about uh, urban growth, or just the need to provide sustainable food systems, transportation systems, so forth and so on, we can really look towards these countries to see what's going on, what are some of the challenges they face, but also what are some of the ways to work through the challenges, especially related to sustainability. Now, there's in I think public public administration, especially regard to like human relations theories and human resources and things of that nature. There's something that we use. It's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's really it's not. It's more of a psychological basis of needs of humanity, but also it serves as a good framework, a good pyramid for understanding levels of needs for people. At the very bottom are human beings' basic needs, such as food, water, sleeping, so forth and so on, breathing. But at the very top, it's the concept of self-actualization, theories related to morality, creativity, so forth and so on. But what's important here is that for every human being, there are basic needs which need to be met. And when we talk about basic needs, we're talking about food, water, shelter, and things of that nature. So when we talk about population growth, we're talking about also the need to facilitate systems, social systems, but also backed by governmental systems that can support the development of basic human needs. And when we do have a means of measuring basic human needs, what the human being needs to meet the basic necessities. There was a concept of the basic needs approach that was developed in the 1970s, which is a way to measure how much food someone needs to consume, shelter, clothing, and things of that nature. And over time, this measurement has expanded to include things such as sanitation, education, and healthcare. But what's important here, and also important, I guess, for the field of public administration, and when you talk about economic and social development, is this is really the way we go about measuring what the poverty line is, the poverty rate is within countries, how much consumption does an individual need to consume and what they need to consume to meet their basic needs. And this, if you look at the United Nations and the World Bank data, it varies per country, but it's really what basket of goods does a person need to meet their basic necessities. Now, within that basic needs, there are different baskets of goods. And the most recent sustainable development goals developed by the UN, it seeks to capture those goals and needs in a quantifiable measurement to then put forth plans on how countries can work on these various issues to really support the development of people within their countries, but also trying to move the world forward. But what's interesting about the most recent United Nations goals, they've always been targeted or used to to set measurable goals to bring people out of poverty. But this is the first time those goals have been wrapped and framed within the need for to do it in a sustainable manner, in a sustainable way. And that's interesting because it's been found that at some point you can develop economically and socially, but sometimes it's been done, or it can be done in a way that's not sustainable. So, and later on in the discussion, I'll get more to that. Now, in 2016, in line right after the Sustainable Development Goals were approved, there was also the Paris Agreement, which was a remarkable feat because it got 195 nations to agree to an accord to reduce, to shoot for reductions in waste. Can everybody mute? If you're not speaking, can you work to mute? Because some feedback is coming into.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so in 2016, the Paris agreements were signed, and that was the first time that most countries in the world came together to say, okay, we know that global warming is a challenge, and we want to set some sort of definable, definite goals for the reduction of greenhouse gases. And this was a watershed moment in this, I would say, long tail of fighting for global plans for sustainability. Now, at this time, some of the largest players were the United States and China with regards to making this deal. Because if you look at this graph of the largest CO2 emitters in the world, there's China, the United States, European Union, so forth and so on. So in order to have any type of deal to reduce emissions, you have to have the largest players at the table. And there's been, within this country and other countries, there's a lot of debate on should we join or not, because when in 2017, when President Trump became president of the United States, he worked to pull out of the Paris Accord because he thought that it was not fair to the United States energy producers, and it would, how should I say, it negatively impact the American economy. But there was a clause in the original agreement that said it would take 3 years to pull out. So in November, the United States, November 2020, the United States formally pulled out of the Paris Accord, but President Biden came in to office in January 2021, and he re-entered the Paris Accord, which was I believe it was a good thing. But there's also another dimension here. Joining any type of accord or striving to reduce emissions is not just good for you and the international community, but many major cities around the world deal with pollution on a day-to-day basis. And pollution has negative health impacts and consequences for the people who live in the cities, especially during summer times, especially when it's very hot and the wind is very low. Smog is a real issue and a challenge in many cities around the world. Now, when we talk about greenhouse emissions and greenhouse gases, a major leader or emitter are what they call are coal-fired or gas-fired power plants. And the real, I guess the basis is that a lot of the greenhouse gases or CO2s that are emitted from the production of electricity, the production of power. And as you know, you need power to do a lot of things, to turn on the lights, to run your computers, to run your cell phones, to run cities. It's a measure, it's a fundamental underlying factor of economic development. So over time, when cities developed and regions developed, power was also a necessary component of that. And depending on which region of the country or in the world a place is, the most cheapest and accessible form of fuel tends to be the fuel that's burned to generate power. So in the eastern United States, there's plentiful coal. So what you find is that there's a lot of coal-fired power plants in the eastern United States. In the western United States, in the southwestern United States, Texas, Colorado, California, there's a lot more oil and gas. So you get a lot more oil and gas fired power plants in those regions. But the thing is that no matter what type of power plant, what type of fuel is used, there are negative consequences for burning those power plants. Now, for the most part, throughout the United States, I think in 2015, about 67% of electricity in the United States was produced by what they call fossil fuels: coal, natural gas, and petroleum, which is another type of fuel. 33% of electricity that was generated was by coal, another 33% by natural gas, 20% by nuclear energy, and 6% by hydropower. When we talk about renewable energy, it's about 7%. So biomass, geothermal, solar, and wind. And that's very important because when we talk about switching over to renewables or green energy and things of that nature, it's still in its infancy, but it has a lot of ways to grow, but it's still in its infancy. Now, when we talk power, we talk about power generation. There are ways to, we talk about a few ways to generate the power, but what do we use it for? In the United States, 18% of the power that's generated is used for air conditioning, cooling our homes. About 9% is used for water heating, taking a hot shower in the morning. 9% is used for lighting, 7% for refrigeration, 7% for space heating, about 6% for TV equipment. So we use electricity for the modern conveniences of the modern world. And one of the things that's interesting is that everybody depends on their refrigerator. Everyone uses their television, or now people use their cell phone. when we can, we use the air conditioning, so forth and so on. So there's the debate. We need electricity, um, and we know for our modern conveniences. So but we know that there are some negative byproducts of it, and it's a global challenge. So there's no easy answer here, is what I'm trying to say. Now, just so you also know, I do live in New York City, and this is one of about 10 power generation plants that are in New York City. It's called the Ravenswood Power Plant, and it's probably one of the largest generators of power within the city of New York. So you typically have the power plants, but this one, like many, has a large housing complex that has about 7,000 residents that live within the complex, and they're people of color in the United States. Race and class have a large they overlap in a lot of ways because of histories of discrimination and racism and things of that nature. But also, when you talk about power plants, power generation, there's also a public policy dimension here about, and it's really who gets what, when, and how. And there's a strong correlation between power plants being located in areas where people have low income, people come from minority backgrounds, and they're less powerful to fight off the placement of the power plants or the power generators within, or for that matter, environmentally sensitive uses within their communities. So for example, these houses were built in the late 1930s, but this power plant was built 30 years later after the houses were built. But there's also these, how should I say, informal mechanisms that keep things like this power plant in its location, because power is a valuable commodity. And this power plant over the past 10 years was probably, the owners were paid about 1.2 billion just to keep this power plant operational and ready to start at a minute's notice, because power is a very valuable commodity in New York City. Now, why is it, what would be the impact of a power plant in someone's neighborhood, and what are the health impacts? Well, power plants, just in general, that burn fossil fuels, when those fossil fuels are burned to generate electricity, they emit really some toxic chemicals, such as nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxide, and ozone and fine particulate matter. Nitrogen oxides and sulfur dioxide, they kind of they rise into the atmosphere and they stay there. Either if it rains, they'll come down into the back to land, or they'll hang out in the atmosphere. But on a really hot day when the sun is out, they stay in the air, and they cause what they call they create what they call ozone, which a lot of ways is we typically call it smog. It's when the city will have like an orange haze over it in some way or another. So when you're in it, you don't see it right in your face, so to speak, but it does impact your visibility, or the visibility. But when you're very far away, you can see like an orange or brownish haze over a city. Well, when you live in that area, you're breathing in these fine particulate matters, and that they have long-term impacts upon people's health. When you breathe in fine particulate matter, the types of impacts, it goes to your lungs, pancreas, heart, and your brain. And this is like these particles, they kind of, they have impacts over a long duration of time. And it's not something that happens that day, but it can be high rates of asthma in an area. You have more children will go to the hospital because they cannot breathe. Senior citizens will have issues and challenges and things of that nature. But these issues are well documented by medical communities here in the United States, but also around the world. This photo is the city of Los Angeles. This is where I grew up. And the air quality is better today. But when I was younger, when you would go during some summer days, you'd go outside and you would play, your chest would be very heavy. And it would hurt because you're breathing in air that has high rates of the particulate matter, and we just called it smog. And it's something that's there. So you kind of, quote unquote, you get used to it, so to speak. But during COVID, since COVID-19, there have been a couple of studies, one groundbreaking study that recently came out by Harvard, by the Harvard School of Public Health. And it found that communities that were located near a lot of the power plants that burn fossil fuels, there were increased numbers in deaths that can be attributed to the problems that people have because of ingesting the toxins that come from the fossil fuel plants. And really, the challenge is this: over the long term, people are exposed to the toxic chemicals because of where they live. And because of that, once something like COVID comes, that attacks the lungs and the respiratory system, you're more susceptible. Your body is weaker, and it's harder to fight for your body to fight. Now, when we talk about particulate matter and pollution, in air pollution and sustainability, it's not just in the United States where we have this challenge, but this is a challenge globally, especially in rapidly developing countries. And because the quickest way to electrify a city, especially that's growing rapidly, is through the use of fossil fuels. It makes sense. This was a table that I pulled off that I pulled up to see which cities have the highest concentrations of particulate matter in the air. And many of these cities are in India, China, and Pakistan, which are high growth cities and regions. But some of the things that are allowing them to grow are causing more toxins to be placed in the air. And they have real health implications and challenges for people that live there. Now, in New York City, and since I live here, there are some of the ways that people and community groups have come together to work to make it a more greener city and a more pedestrian is one like a